This is a Sony HVR-S270. It was released in 2008 and was Sony's first true professional HDV camera. It took HDV from smaller handheld cameras that were prosumer at best to a respectable broadcast format. As such, it has all the features you'd expect from a professional camera. Full manual controls, shoulder mount form factor, tons of inputs and outputs, V-mount batteries, built-in ND filters, and even interchangeable lenses. Plus a hefty weight of just over 6 kilograms and V-lock attachments to put that weight on a tripod. Let's start the tour with one of the most important parts of any camera, the sensor. In this case a 1440 by 810 3 CMOS sensor. As usual with 3-chip sensors, the colors are excellent and the resulting picture is quite sharp, even though the sensor utilizes pixel shift to get the full 1080 lines. Sony devoted quite a lot of time to their presentation of this special pixel shift technique. All pixels are rotated by 45 degrees and the signal is interpolated per color instead of needing all 3 colors. This allows much better resolution than traditional techniques did, according to Sony anyway. Since HD resolutions didn't differ between regions like SD resolutions did, except of course for the refresh rate, Sony offered a hardware key to allow region switching. My camera has it installed. This is quite useful even in PAL countries. A lot of smartphones don't offer the option to record at 50 frames per second, and intercutting 50 and 60 FPS material looks very jittery. Setting the camera to 60 FPS allows you to smoothly mix the two. The HDV format was originally created in 2003 by JVC and supported by Sony, Canon and Sharp. It comes in 2 flavors, HDV1, which is 1280 by 720 progressive video, and HDV2, which is 1440 by 1080 interlaced video, but supports progressive video at half the frame rates. The HVR-S270 exclusively shoots HDV2, and of course DV, like all HDV camcorders do. As a whole, HDV was a way to extend the lifespan of the DV format's cassettes, and as such the data rate was identical at 25 Mbits. Given the far superior MPEG-2 compression compared to DV's MJPEG-like compression, however, it doesn't look half bad. HDV was essentially the consumer alternative to formats like HDCAM, but quickly found its way into the prosumer and then the professional market, much like DV did a few years earlier. The controls are what you'd expect from an ENG camera. Physical, tactile switches and buttons that are easy to use even if you're not looking at them. There's the standard gain control with user assignable levels, a switch for color bars and one for white balance. The color bar switch also controls a feature called dynamic contrast control, or DCC for short. This allows the camera to dial overexposed areas of the picture back down without affecting the overall brightness. This increases the dynamic range of the recorded picture. At the front are the white and black balance and the shutter speed switches. In addition, this camera comes with a few extras. Right at the front are 6 user assignable buttons and below them are switches to override the manual settings with automatic ones. Gain, white balance and finally full auto. At the back, also in the standard spot, are the audio controls, level controls, auto and manual switches, and finally switches to select between mic level, with or without phantom power, and line level. This is also where one of the biggest features at the time for this camera shows. It supports 4-channel audio. Pretty much every HDV camera only supported 2-channel audio, except for this one. It does this by utilizing a little-known extension to MPEG-2 audio known as MPEG multi-channel. This downmixes the 4 audio channels into 2 in a very special way. If your software doesn't support the feature, it'll simply play 2 channels and you won't be able to tell. Software support for this feature is very sparse, however. Almost no software, including VLC and ffmpeg, will recognize the 4 channels. I've settled on a janky but workable solution instead. The audio can be extracted with a program called mec2lamd. For unknown reasons it crashes outside a debugger and the resulting file's length is wrong. The length difference seems to come from a wrongly assumed sample rate, so it's fixed relatively easily. I very rarely use the 4-channel audio feature because of these issues though. Still, if you do decide to use it, you get 4 proper XLR connectors on the camera, 2 at the front and 2 at the back. One of the front 2 is usually connected to the shotgun microphone mounted on the camera. The deck on this camera is something special too. It's called the R mechanism in the service manuals and was used in the DSR-250 camera as well as the stationary HVR-M25, HVR-M35 and DSR-25 decks. It can take both full-size and small tapes and is remarkably robust. According to the service manual, it's rated for up to 5,000 hours of operation with minimal maintenance. And even if the deck gives out, you can still use the camera. It has a slot for the MRC1 right next to it. The MRC1 is a neat little external recorder that records the video to compact flash cards. The camera can be set to record only to tape, only to compact flash, or to a mix of both. Some people like the redundancy of recording to tape and compact flash simultaneously, so that's one option. The other is to use the MRC1 to cover up tape switches. It can be set to come on once the tape runs out and turn back off once the next tape is running. This means virtually infinite recording time. If you're fine with normal recording time though, a 32GB CF card will last about 2.5 hours, which is plenty. In fact, I almost exclusively use the MRC1 on my camera, leaving the tape deck nearly unused. The camera comes stock with a 12x lens made by Zeiss. The lens is nice, although bulky, and provides both full automatic and full manual capability. It comes with the usual 3 rings for focus, zoom and iris. Do note, however, that they're all servo operated and the iris ring does not have physical end stops. This is an issue for some cameramen, but if you're watching the readout in the viewfinder instead of trusting your hand position, it should be fine. The focus ring can be slid backwards and forwards into 2 different positions. This allows you to choose between full manual focus and autofocus, with the option to help the autofocus by turning the ring. The lens is also equipped with Sony's excellent steady-shot image stabilization system. Since all of this functionality requires extra connections, Sony opted to use a connector inside the lens bayonet, much like a lot of photo lenses use. The downside of this approach is that this lens will only ever work on the HVR-S270. The Zeiss lens exhibits some chromatic aberration in bright light, especially close to the edges of the picture. Since the lens mount is a standard 1/3 inch bayonet mount, we can just swap the lens to fix this. I originally thought that this Fujinon TH16x5.5 would do better. As you'll see in a bit though, the tests have proven me wrong. The Zeiss lens is actually quite good. Originally from a JVC Pro HD camera, in this case their GY HD200, the TH16 also fits straight on the HVR-S270. It uses a standard lens connector which plugs in here. You'll notice how much thinner it is. This is due to all the rings being fully manual instead of servo operated. That does come with a downside though. You lose the autofocus, the automatic gain adjustment, the automatic back focus adjustment and the steady shot function. Here's some test footage I shot with it and the Zeiss lens for comparison. You can see how the chromatic aberrations are actually worse on the TH16. When this camera came out, LCD tech had just gotten good enough to use for professional viewfinders, although a lot of cameras still came with CRTs. This viewfinder only has a resolution of 852 by 480 pixels, but it has a trick up its sleeve. The LCD itself is monochrome, but it's driven at triple the normal refresh rate, 150 or 180 Hz, with a colored backlight. For each frame, the LCD displays the 3 red, green and blue parts in sequence. This gives it a much better resolution than would have been possible with the classic subpixel arrangement, which essentially divides the resolution by 3. Also slightly unusual is the fold-out display mounted on top instead of on the camera body. Consumer cameras also usually disable the viewfinder when the display is opened. Not so with this one, which can be quite useful. For instance, you could shoot an interview and allow the person who's being interviewed to see themselves. As is expected of a professional camera, the S270 comes with a ton of ports in the standard locations around the rear. What sets it apart from its consumer brethren are the XLR power input and the HDSDI video output. HDSDI can be used for external recorders like my Blackmagic Video Assist or for live productions. Since the S270 works in 422 color space internally and only downsamples it to 420 for HDV compression, the HDSDI port exposes higher quality video than the camera itself can record. Here's some comparison footage. Note how there's less color bleeding on sharp contrasts. One area where this difference is very noticeable is chroma keying. You'll be able to get a much cleaner key with a better chroma subsampling. All in all, this is still a great camera, even though it's over a decade old. If you're looking to get into big broadcast cameras, this one is a solid choice. As usual, I'll leave you with more test footage of the camera, and I hope you enjoyed this video as much as I did making it.